Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Okay, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. I'm in Nashville still, and right now I'm in with Gary Keil, who is part of the Pharmacy Leadership and Education Institute, but he actually has an expertise in burnout and pharmacist burnout, and this has been a recent, not a recent issue. We've been burnt out for quite a while, but we're doing a better job of addressing it, and I know students are working with self-care in the classrooms, so I wanted to get an expert in and talk about it. So, Gary, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Tony. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, so that's the one thing that's interesting is students tend to be a little bit more aware, but it certainly doesn't mean that students are doing what they need to do. So the APhA Lead 360 program that folks may know about but may not is something fairly new. We started it last fall. APhA Foundation and APhA decided that this self-care, self-leadership, if you will, was important enough to create the entire Lead 360 Institute. So that includes the Lead 360 program that I'm a part of, the Mentor 360, and then I think it's Manage 360. That's okay. The third one. So we've got these three different tracks that are going. Our Lead 360 program specifically focuses in on the individual. What are we as pharmacists doing, more importantly as people, to try to start to address our stress, our crazy, chaotic lives that, quite honestly, is leading to a tremendous amount of straight burnout, if not a lot of morbidity and mortality that we're starting to find.
Okay. So walk me through the Lead 360 program. So tell me how many days it is, or if it's a day, and then within that day, how it works. So tell me start to finish what that's about.
Absolutely. So the first programs we did, one was in DC and one was in Indianapolis. And these were just about a 2.5 day program where folks would come in, do a little bit of pre-work, just thinking really about their lives, because most of us, quote unquote, don't have time to even think about what's hitting us. Yeah. That's not true. Everyone has 24 hours in a day. Like Gandhi had 24 hours in a day. Yeah, so do Olympic athletes, right? So, but we ask people to kind of reflect on what's happening in their world. And then when they show up, over the course of the 2 days, say, we have them walk through various things like, really, what is the image of leadership versus the hard work of leadership? And I don't like to say the hard work of leadership, even though it is, because it should be enjoyable. It actually should be enjoyable when you think about it. So we start talking about what is the image versus the work, let's say, of leadership. And then we start unpacking things like, what are your personal values, your personal strengths, your personal interests, and your personal needs? And so we call it the VISN, V-I-S-N, because a lot of people have vision, but, they're just kind of thinking it's just sight. And so we tie it into values. So over the course of the next really day and a half, we start diving deeply into things like, if you're not living your passion, how can you expect to create an environment where other people can live their own passions? It's something called the law of the lid. I don't know if some people are familiar with John Maxwell, but he basically says no organization can rise above where their leader is. And quite honestly, if a leader is stressed, the followers start mimicking the leader's stress because we look up to our leaders, right? And so by the end of the program, we really start forming what are called personal action plans. So what are you going to do Monday when you get back to the same toxic environment? So sometimes people get really excited at potential and possibilities of change, and they go right back into this toxic soup. So we have accountability buddies is what we call them, because we know if you don't have an action plan, you don't do anything. But if you don't involve anyone else, the chances of you actually doing that are probably 25%, maybe tops. Now, so these programs are the kind of the extended version. Last Thursday here at the APhA meeting, just a couple days ago, we did a 10-hour immersive on this program for 21 pharmacists. So it was pretty phenomenal. But that's like drinking through a fire hose. You get a lot of information. But the 21 people at the end at 6 o'clock p.m., they were still ready for more. It was amazing to watch. So that's kind of the shortened version. But the most important one is called the virtual 360. And so what that is that's a 3-month, very light but deep touch over the course of, those 3 months to really start to personalize it. So we have between 3 and 4 people in what we call pod groups. And the coach really helps the pod members stand accountable to themselves, as well as to really personalize the information that they learned in the bigger program. So it takes it longitudinally, and we're hoping actually to use some of these folks next year as kind of coaches themselves. So we're starting to build out not just the original material, but the opportunities for others. So that's awesome. The Lead 60 program.
Okay, so I want to talk first a little bit about accountability. I'm a big fan of Gretchen Rubin, who wrote The Happiness Project, but she wrote a recent book called The 4 Tendencies. And if I get this right, the 4 tendencies are that you can either do things on your own, and you tend to not have problems with most things. There's the rebel, and this is how you meet external expectations, who will fight you with the expectation. But then, and this is where I think many pharmacists fit in, is the obliger. So the obliger needs personal accountability, and they'll make appointments, or they'll arrive at appointments, they'll do things when others tell them, and they'll do things for other people, but they won't do them for themselves. So I don't mean to say let's be more selfish, but tell me maybe let's do 3 different actions that we could do now that could help us out. So the first thing is, how do we remember, or how do we make sure to put our needs ahead of those others so that we can serve them at the best capacity?
Oh, I love that. And I'm very familiar with her work, and it's absolutely beautiful. So I tend to think of pharmacists as wounded healers.
I love that. That is a soundbite. That's a soundbite.
So pharmacists definitely are wounded healers, because we usually had some kind of person or some kind of event in our lives that happened, and somebody helped us. And so we decided at a particular point in our life that we were going to give back. That very easily turns into self-sacrifice. Okay, so if there are any wounded healers listening to this, okay, that's all right, but how long can you keep it up? It's like running, like running an ultra marathon, which I do. But if you don't take in nutrition, if you don't rest, if you don't take time for yourself, there's no way you're going to finish the quote unquote long run.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing is to always take time out every single day. Don't say I'm going to do something on the weekend. Don't say I'm going to do something next week. Every single day you should have a dose of health, a dose of sanity, a dose of relaxation. And so if it's even 10 minutes, even if it's 15 minutes in a day, if you add that up over the course of a year, that's a tremendous amount of change. So don't put things off as the biggest thing. But think of your life as a plane that is going down, because it will crash.
This is inspirational interviews.
Yes, it is. I'm a positive psychology coach too, by the way. But it has to do with the thought of put your oxygen mask on first. I mean, we hear that. We hear that kind of ad nauseum, but it is so true. If we don't do that, we will absolutely burn out. And interestingly enough, when we become stressed at about a 3 out of 10 on a stress scale, and how many of us get the luxury of even going down to 3 on a daily basis, we damage our brains and we put our patients' lives in jeopardy. We know this stuff. And so if we want to be a wounded healer and keep that up, do work for ourselves, because we're saving our patients. How's that?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing.
Okay, so first thing, we're kind of talking about that obligations and trying to make it so maybe you have a coach or somebody that'll keep you accountable to the things that are most valuable to you. So maybe on the second level, so we go into our work environment. Let's say that it's not aligned with our values. Maybe there was some pressure to get a job just because you needed a job based on some financial debt or things like that. What are some ways that, without changing the job, what are some ways that maybe we can get out of that woe is me and get in more of a positive mindset of They've actually said, that number $75,000 is a happiness number, where you don't really get much happiness after it. So, you've basically got somebody who's in a job making $100,000 to $120,000 a year saying, "Woe is me." And so on the outside, people are like, "Woe is what? What's your problem?" But tell me a little bit about some techniques or some tips, tactics that we could use to help with burnout if we aren't able to currently change our environment.
Yeah. So if we, and most of us can't really change our environment, but we can absolutely influence our environment. And so I like to think of things in health terms and running terms. And the Couch to 5K program, some people have heard about. I actually don't like the Couch to 5K program because it takes things too quickly.
Okay.
It takes things too fast. And so the first thing is to just simply take stock of your current situation. So if you're on the couch, be happy on the couch. If you are stressed, actually appreciate it, because stress is a good thing, or at least it can be. If there are parts of your life that are stressing you, just simply look at them under a different lens. So look at them differently, saying, okay, is there some kind of positive to that? Because we can have bad stress, but seen in a different way, and it actually changes our physiology. So we know that, right? So you can look at things differently. But the bigger thing is to start to unpack what is absolutely vitally important to your values. Because if we go against our values, we live what's called a non-concordant life. Okay, so self-concordance means we will lie to ourselves. We will lie to others. We will justify everything we do in order to harmonize the image of our life with the reality of our life. It's not that we change the life, it's that we kind of change the story.
Sure.
And so we know we do that. Self-compassion is critical. So if no one is familiar with Kristen Neff, N-E-F-F, and her Kristen is with a K, she's a researcher and she's looked at self-compassion. And so we know flat out that until we have self-compassion, we're actually not going to change. We will go into that discordant state and just simply lie to ourselves and lie to others. So stand in front of the mirror and be okay with wherever you are. Because you got there, you can get someplace else. Do it in small steps, though. Don't try to change too many things too quickly. And so again, it's like that Couch to 5K. Well, okay, Couch to 5K should actually take some people upwards to a year and a half. But, these programs are 6 weeks. And for a lot of people, they finish the 5K, but they kill themselves doing it.
Sure.
Not good.
Yeah. So now we've kind of talked about going into the workplace. We've talked about some external expectations. Most people have some partner of some sort or another. And a lot of times when I'm afraid to ask my wife for time off to do something like coming to APhA, and because I don't want to disappoint her, I don't want to put more work on her. But then when I do, she's like, "Oh yeah, you totally need to get away because you have been such and such," and I didn't see it. I didn't realize that I'd been a bit more grumpy, or I've been, things have been bad. So, how do you engage your partner? And congratulations on your engagement, actually. But how do you engage your partner in saying, I need this or I need help? Like on the weekend, I don't say, I need 3 hours off. I say, I'm going to go run 20. And then that seems to be fine. But I make sure to do it like between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. so we can still make it to church and things like that. But how do we involve our partners in making our own lives better?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the accountability that we need is crucial. How we do it is just as critical. And so, getting back to say our partners or our bosses for that matter, there's something called nonviolent communication, and people can look it up. NVC is a beautiful way of communicating amongst people. It doesn't really matter if it's your partner, your boss, or anyone. This is valuable for patients as well. It's a way of couching what we feel. So no one can take away our feelings. No one can say, no, you don't feel that, type of thing. And so nonviolent communication just simply is a way of communicating where you say, when this happens, I feel this. Okay. So when I don't exercise, I feel sluggish. I feel angry. I didn't know this stuff. I feel kind of grumpy, right? I need your help in order for me to not experience that. Are you willing to help me out? Because obviously if we couch it in that way, this is all of our feelings, and it resonates in them saying, I want to help you out, because we are nurturers by kind of nature, if you will. But there's also a negative impact if we don't help, because, like our spouses, if we're kind of cranky with them, they got to deal with us.
Right. So I become the fourth child.
Absolutely. And so if they see the benefit for them, they'll be more likely to support us. And so, but we start the conversation with our own feelings. We have to own our feelings. That's the one thing that's kind of scary.
Well, let's talk about how we say that, because sometimes when I talk to my wife, I'll say something, and immediately I'll know that was wrong. And and it was the phraseology and the words that I use to get backwards a step is, what did you hear me say? Because what you heard me say obviously is not what I meant to say. Yeah. So how can we phrase I need help without saying, throw me a life raft or throw me how can we phrase that?
Yeah, so it's actually not an easy thing if you're used to communicating in a different communication style, okay? So there's various levels of listening that we know about, and kind of research shows this, that level 1 listening, you kind of hear the words, but yet you don't listen to what they're saying. That happens a lot, especially with kids when they're watching TV. Level 2 listening is a little bit more, you're listening to the words, but you're thinking about what you're going to say next. Like you're trying to one-up them, or you're trying to bring up something from the past. That's actually not
But
good
you
learning.
did,
Exactly. So having even these types of conversations, saying we know that there are these different ones. Level 3 listening is actually where you start to listen to what the person is saying. And really, it starts to resonate. You don't need to solve problems or anything, but you're really there for them. Level 4 listening is really the key, where you're listening to the words, you're hearing their emotions, you're seeing their body language. And so just simply knowing that there's different levels of communication is the start. It's just to say, honey, I have something to speak with you about. When can we speak about this? Because it's important. Because if you just kind of show up and your spouse is in the middle of preparing dinner, dealing with the kids, had their bad day, it's not kind of a good thing to go, I want to go for a run.
I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it resonates as on point, very true.
Yeah, and so it's not okay to just throw information at somebody and they're not prepared. And so even with your spouse saying, this is important enough to me, I would really like to have quiet time where the two of us can really focus in on it. I don't want to impose on you while you're doing dinner and dealing with the kids and all that. And so just simply establishing a safe environment, where it's non-threatening, and then going, these are the different levels of listening. I know that I may have not done anything but level 1 listening recently, or 2 or 3. Yeah. I want to better our relationship. So you start with that. And then you start with the nonviolent communication, but by just simply saying, these are my feelings, I'm owning them. I also want to own my future by making it better, not just for me, but for us. And so once, it is selfish, but it's also beyond ourselves. And usually our spouses are like, yeah, you're right. You've been really cranky.
It's about time you asked for this.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, those are some great tips. Thanks again for being on the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. Are you feeling a bit stressed at work, unhappy with where you're going? If you are, you might want to come to the Lead 360 program in Washington, D.C., July 14th through the 15th. For more information, you can go to www.pharmacist.com/lead360. Register, find out some additional information. We look forward to seeing you there.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.